Okay, hello again. Here we go. It is officially episode 2, as opposed to episode 1.5, which I guess it was on Sunday, of working on this Deck of Many Things app for iOS, which is exciting. It's a bit of a weird day. I I started this in the new year. I was on a relatively chilled out project at work, and I was like, nope, got to get this started. Got to get working on personal projects again. Got to do all the things. And that seemed like it was a great time to start because it's like January. Things are pretty chilled, but oh my gosh, things got really busy, and so I have been coding furiously all day, very very much all day. Also, my daughter has started waking up at like 4 in the morning pretty reliably now, and or sometimes three. She got up at 3 this morning, and I was so anxious about work that I couldn't get back to sleep, so I just started working. That's a bad thing. Don't do that. That's bad for your health. So today, I guess it's time to continue on with our deck of many things. By the way, the summary of episode 1 that we did is coming to VOD soon. I had intended to post it this week, and it is actually up on my YouTube account. I just haven't had a chance to like write the metadata yet, which you would think, but when I do something on Sunday and then it's Monday and suddenly it's work time, and then home and baby time, it gets pretty busy. So that's fine. I'm gonna continue. I'm gonna get that up ASAP, and probably this weekend sometime, and we will go from there. My hope is to go for 3 hours today, but we will see how that goes. All right, let's try and continue our work on the Deck of Many Things app. So where we were last time, we had put together some models in this playground. You can go back and have a look at the VOD for the episode 1 summary if you like, because there's a lot on those in there. I should probably switch over to the screen. There we go. Now you can see what I'm looking at. We made models for the deck and for the cards in the deck, and you can draw cards from the deck, so that's good. And then we made a game master, and the game master is probably going to be its functionality is probably just going to be put into a view controller, which is our sort of general basic unit for thing that goes on the screen in iOS. So what we're gonna do is try and put together a little bit more of our UI today, and see how that goes. I'm sort of firing from the hip a little bit. We should probably make a list of the things that we want to accomplish. Like, should I bring up a text editor? Because if I bring up a text editor, it might have something embarrassing on it. Oh, I know. Okay, because I know that I was using Sublime Text. The thing where like every app on the Mac now like opens the last thing that you were looking at is intimidating, because it means that sometimes you open it up and you were like getting a loan from a bank, and so it's got like a note that's like, here's my salary, here's my wife's salary. You don't want to show the internet that. So yeah, okay. Love recipe.html. Perfect. So what are we gonna do? We the functionality that we want to get into this app. So first of all, we want basically a main screen with a draw button, and the number of remaining draws. We already basically have that. It's pretty rough, but we're gonna have it. When the user draws a card, show another view with that card displayed. the card view has name, image, description, I guess rules instead of description, and card view can be dismissed. And then I guess we can say that main view decrements draws. Okay, so that's our very, very basic functionality. So that's the first thing that we're going to try and get in. Now, ultimately, that's a pretty boring app, though we want to actually have it do other things. We want to get images in there as well. Maybe we'll do all this first and get the images in later. So card view, CAD view. Don't know that particular card in deck of many things, but card view shows images. Good. And so when you go back to the main view shows previously drawn cards. Carousel. So I'm thinking that like it could have like a horizontally oriented view of all the cards that you've drawn, sort of laid out across the screen, so you can like swipe through them sideways to look at the different cards you've drawn and then tap into them. Okay, so we can tap into cards from main view, tap into previously drawn cards. So we want to be able to like look at the cards, and then I'm gonna say Hearthstone hand view thing. So that's instead of just clicking on a button to draw cards, it would be cool if you had like that fan of cards, like in Hearthstone, like across the bottom of the screen, and you could like drag cards out of it. Kind of, that would be neat. So that's a little more ambitious. And then we'll put above that settings screen. And what do we want on the settings screen? We want the different rules setting. I don't know how much of this we're going to get done today, but you know, this is stuff to shoot for. And then there's going to be like a lot of like designy stuff here too, where we spend time like actually just taking this stuff and making it look pretty. But I at this point, I'm just kind of trying to get a handle on the like minimum amount of things that we're trying to get into the app, and maybe we can go from there. So yeah, let's start with this. So if we go back into our app, you'll remember from last time that we have our app delegate, and it creates this draw view controller. And we created one of those draw view controller we defined over here. It is going to be the main sort of interface for our app. It sets our root view to the draw view controller, so it's the view that we start at. It like makes our window visible. So we show that on the screen, and then the draw view controller, all we did was we gave it a custom view, which we called draw view, which is defined here. And then we said that the number of draws remaining were 0. The draw view over here has two things in it. It has, a label called draws remaining label, and it has a draw button. Somehow my secondary monitor / iPad just went to sleep. I don't like that very much. Sorry, I want that back. I do. Hopefully that didn't screw things up for you guys. I think I think that you're okay. All right, the monitor's back. We're okay. Yeah. So I so yeah, we've added our components here. We have a stack view. That's what a layout tool that we can put other views inside, and it arranges them in a way that we want them to be arranged. And we have used something called layout constraints to stick that in the center of our view. Not actually the best way to do that, but we can fix that. And then we've put a label. Labels are just something that shows text, that shows the number of draws remaining, and then a button that gives us a sense of, or gives us, a draw, allows us to draw a card. But it doesn't yet do anything. We haven't hooked it up to anything. So if we run this, I'm going to switch this to an iPhone SE. I like testing on the SE simulator because it's small and it loads quicker than the other simulators because it's small. Also, like, I'm on a MacBook Air here, and so normally when I'm doing something like this, I'll be on a MacBook Pro and have like a Retina screen. So having a low DPI screen is not great for iOS because every iOS device has a high DPI screen at this point. So let's see how long this actually takes to launch. Hopefully it will also take less time to launch on subsequent launches, but because of the constraints of working with streaming and compiling at the same time, my processor is being kind of pegged. So we'll see what happens here. Okay, we have a running simulator. Sorry, I realized that was a loud slurp of water. And that is like loading its way to something. Gosh, I hope it doesn't take that long to run every single time. Because if it does, that's going to be a problem. Okay, so let's, I guess, keep going here while we're waiting for this. So I guess the first thing that we should probably do is actually, there we go. So we have our draws remaining, and we have a draw button that does not do anything. So the first thing that I'd like to do is fix this layout a little bit so that it doesn't suck quite so badly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be good and say git branch, and we'll call this cleanup UI. I could probably have done that from inside the tower interface. Oh well. Oh, geez, I forgot that I made some fix-ups here as well. So we can... How do we want to do that? Let's, I guess, do that before we bother doing this. So, just for expedience, I'm just going to delete that for now because we haven't done anything with it. Git rebase. Just going to merge. Just going to merge these fix-ups in because I forget exactly what I was fixing, but my clever notation tells me that it's whatever the previous commit was. Okay, so now let's, so we're in our update UI branch. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move these up here. And because I'm a good boy, I'm going to start labeling stuff. So I'm going to say mark, these are the properties. This keeps our code organized, but it also has it's something that the IDE actually picks up on. So if we click here, you can see that we now have heading for properties. And if I go down here and I go now we have a heading for lifecycle, which is very helpful. Okay, so here's we have two initializers. The only thing that this initializer is doing is it's setting the background color to white. And then we're setting some layout constraints. And the layout constraints are not particularly good layout constraints because, as we demonstrated last time, if I type a whole bunch of text in here, it will overflow the edges of the screen because we've got one stack. The stack will resize itself to however big these things are. I can actually show you. We'll see how fast this goes. It might be a little. Okay, so yeah, so our stack has resized itself around the views, and then the stack itself is pinned to the middle. But if these views get too long, the stack will increase its size outward. And then we turn it sideways and everyone goes, oh my gosh, it's in 3D. Oh, wow, your text editor is amazing. Yeah, because every iOS developer has to use the same text editor. Not true. There are other programs that are used to develop for iOS besides Xcode, but Xcode is definitely the tool that most of us use. Okay, let's go. So I'm trying to think. I had this thought that I wanted to separate out the strings into a strings file. But I'm going to leave that for now and do that in a bit of a cleanup pass later. So let's just clean up these constraints first. So actually, instead of having the stack aligned to the center, which is kind of bad form, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick the stack to the sides of the view. So instead of that, I will say stack dot leading anchor constraint equal to self dot, what is it called? Layout margins guide? Leading anchor. And then we'll do that again for the trailing anchor. We use leading and trailing instead of left and right because you can iOS apps are used by people all over the world, and some of them have languages that go right to left. And if your iPhone is being used by someone, or if someone using right to left orientation uses your app, then everything will appear backwards, like the entire UI will be flipped. And so the result of that is that if you have everything with left and right constraints, that stuff won't flip because it's left and right no matter which orientation the screen is on. But if it's leading and trailing, then that stuff in your UI will flip. The contents of it won't flip, but the stuff itself will flip. So it's good to always use leading and trailing constraints as opposed to left and right constraints when you don't care. If you do care specifically that you don't want things to flip, if your stuff is being used by an international user using a right to left language, then obviously you use left and right, but they're barely used anymore. Okay, so you can see that made our UI look a little uglier than it already even was, and it was already pretty ugly. But it moved this over here. Why? Because our label is left aligned, and we have pinned the sides of the label to the edges of the view. We haven't pinned them to the very edge of the view. We pinned them to the layout anchor. And the layout anchor changes depending on a number of different factors. It's a sort of the culmination of a bunch of different things. So the layout anchor will automatically avoid things like the line at the bottom of the iPhone X. So it will it'll like dodge that kind of stuff. It'll also automatically on like an iPad, if you've got a lot of text, it'll move it'll follow the readable content guide and sort of move that stuff in from the side to make it easier to read. So if you've got like if you can imagine like an iPad in landscape, that's a lot of text going all across the screen. It's a lot to take in and read. So that's why often a good idea to follow these guides. Don't necessarily need to. You can just pin stuff to the side of the screen if you want to. I'm not your mom. All right, so let's also put this stuff at the bottom. So stack dot bottom anchor equal to self dot layout margin guide dot bottom anchor. I am not going to try running the iPhone 10 simulator on here because the computer will probably explode. This is one day we will have a better computer for doing this. It's the dream. Okay, so we'll pin this to the bottom, and let's make this buttons always put their text in the center, but labels will be aligned however you align them. So let's also just change the alignment of the label. So label alignment is center. Remember, these are all enumerators, so they are it's text alignment, isn't it? I thought autocorrect or autocomplete just wasn't working. These are all enumerators, so they have big prefixes to them like UI text alignment dot whatever, but because Swift knows what these things are, it knows that text color should be a color. It's able to infer that like this is UI color dot black, as opposed to just any kind of thing that happens to be called that. So if we run this again, it should put everything at the bottom and sort of in the middle. That's good. That's kind of where we want it for right now. With the idea being that if we go back to that's our terminal. If we go back to our list of things that we want to do, that when we hit the draw button, that looks super ugly. When we hit the draw button, it'll show us a card, and then it'll have like all the cards that we've drawn will be displayed here. Let's move that just a little bit from the bottom. So constant negative, I don't know, 24. That should move it up a bit. Okay, so great. We have fixed our UI such as it is. Do 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 do. Do, do. Oh, okay. So it goes from your chosen branch onto the head branch. So we want like that. I'm not used to doing this in a UI, but I figured that it maybe makes for a better show if I'm actually trying to use Tower to show what I'm doing. So like basically for good practice, we are setting up branches to do stuff and then merging them back in. And again, for the purposes of this, that was pretty redundant, but let's create a new branch. Where is the, oh, there it is. Create new branch, and we'll call it draw cards. Except for we should name it like a branch. Create branch, and let's jump onto it. Okay, whenever we create a branch, it just creates a copy of all our code. Basically, it's a little more complicated than that, but we're basically creating sort of a duplicate and branching off from there so that we can do whatever we want. Multiple people can theoretically be working on multiple branches at the same time that all branch off at the same time, or all branch off the same thing. And then what we're actually tracking is the changes that are made. And so all of those, because we've tracked all the changes, theoretically we can sort of zipper them all back together when all those people turn in all their changes, which is how, like at work, we can have a bunch of different developers working on things at once, and then everyone's stuff theoretically gets merged into the project just fine. Of course, it doesn't. You get conflicts all the time and whatnot, and you've got to go in and make sure that you're fixing those. But for the most part, it works pretty well. So draws remaining and draw. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to want to do here is integrate. I need to fix these. These are bugging me. I want to move these into a folder, but I don't want to do it while I'm on this draw card branch. So we will do it later. We're going to go back to our draw view controller. So in iOS generally we have view controllers, and they contain most of our like business code. Each view controller is responsible for controlling one view. The model that we use, I'm like sketched out to use the word model because the model that we use is called model view controller. So the mental model we use for what we're doing, we have models. Models are they represent the data in our app, and often we separate them into model objects, which are small increments of information that represent actual things, hence object-oriented programming. So we have our models, and then we have our views. That's what we were just working on. That's our layouts. And then we have these controllers that sort of exist in between those two, and they grab information from the models and they put it on the view, and they transmit user information from the view. So if I click this button, or perform a touch action or do whatever, it broadcasts that, or it grabs that, interprets that, it grabs whatever it needs from the model, and then sticks that on the screen. So the view controller, it plays that sort of middle role. It's the peanut butter and jelly in the sandwich, but it also is problematically all encompassing. Like it definitely is a thing on iOS where our view controllers get bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's bad. So we need to limit what we put in our view controllers sometimes, but the functionality of this draw view controller is going to be to draw cards from the deck. So sure, let's go with that. We had this, so I guess we need to bring our models in too. So let's create a new group here, and we'll call it models. And you remember we were working in this playground when we played around with our models. So let's bring our card and our deck in. So I'm just going to copy this. New Swift file. Oh, called it file. That was dumb. I want this to be card. Just that. There we go. Card.swift. And we should only need foundation for this. This doesn't know anything about the UI. Good. And then let's create another one. Next. And we'll call that deck, not surprisingly. Create. And we'll go back to our playground. Didn't open another instance of that, did it? What I really wanted to do was just focus the window, but whatever you say, Xcode. / High Sierra, weird new windowing system. Okay, so there's our deck. We have our deck and we have our card. And so let's just commit that. So you can see this tells us that we have made changes to 4 files. this should not be showing up. So the 3 files that we've actually made changes to, this looks like a temp file of some sort. Oh, I see. That was just representing the changes that we made after creating the file. Okay, so the 3 files that we've changed the deck, we changed the card, and then we changed this thing called the project file. And remember I talked about those merge conflicts that happen at work when people are doing stuff over here and stuff over here, and then they try and merge it back together. That's this thing. This is where the conflicts are going to occur. So the project file is a gigantic XML file that keeps track of everything in your project. Hence the name project file. So you can see here that it's like it knows about these files that I've added. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to commit adding each of these. So I'll say that I added the models folder, and then let's add the card first. So I'm just going to add this file, but I also need to add the fact that I added it to the project. So I want that line and that line. Oh, these are all staged. Why are these all staged? Because I staged the entire file. Okay, we can do better than that. So card, stage those lines, and then we want that we added a models folder, so stage that. And we want everything here but the deck. So stage lines and stage the card. Stage lines. Okay, and we can say add card model commit. And stage the rest. Commit. Okay, so back into what we're doing. So we've added the card and the deck. So let's go into this draw view controller. Swift thankfully keeps track of all of the things that it has access to at any given time. I was going to turn my mic up. I realized when I was editing the VOD of the last video that it was a little low. So let's turn that up just a bit. Maybe that's a little better. Okay, so we have this draw view controller. It doesn't really do anything. So the first thing that we will need to do, I guess, actually is start a game. Like, that's something that I didn't start a game, start a session, a draw session. So you need the main screen needs to have a way to start. Okay, so I guess that's probably the place to start, is we should put another button here that says I'm going to put 2 things here, actually. I'll put a button and I'll just call it, I'm going to change this to label. Okay, so start button, label, draw button. You know, we only need 1 button for right now. Okay, so we have our label and button that are exactly like they used to be, except for I've made their names less specific. Fantastic. I'm going to add a, what else am I going to add? I'm going to add a text field. Did I mention I've been up for a long time? Now, you may notice that I'm using lets to make all of these things, and then I'm like configuring them. I guess we don't really need to translate auto resizing masks into constraints for this. Let's say, I guess we just need to return a text field straight up for right now, because we're not going to lay it out or anything like that. So I'm not going to actually configure it. I will just say, give me a basic UI text field. I will use a layout constraint and say text field dot width anchor. Not that. Width anchor constraint equal to constraint constant 100. And this is yelling at me because I haven't put a comma there. Okay, so our text field has a width of 100, and I will say stack.add range subview text field. So this is useful. The text field is something that comes to us out of the libraries from the out of UIKit, which is the library that we use to make iOS apps, and it comes with a lot of functionality built into it. So that's very useful. One of the things that it comes built in, or that comes built into it, is a keyboard. So we can right, I'm adding things that do not exist anymore to my stack. So it won't let me do that anymore. Oh, and did I do it down here too? Stack. Oh, right. And then in my draw view controller, I want to actually say but it's not referencing draw's remaining label. Okay, I thought that was there. That's odd. I was not sure where that line went. Regardless, label should work now. So back to what I was saying, text fields and text views come with a bunch of functionality automatically. So just by putting it there, we don't have to like make our own keyboard or whatever. If once the user interacts with it, we will just summon the default OS keyboard and it will do what we want. Interesting. So I think, yeah, there it is. It's we can't see it because it doesn't have a border. Let's see if we can fix that. Okay, so we are going to configure this now. Text field dot I think it's called border style, yeah, equals dot round. Is there like a rounded one maybe? Are you gonna give me any autocomplete suggestions? No. Rounded, is that one? What's the enumerator called? UI text border style. Okay. So we get rounded rect. Okay. So that should let us see it. There's still, oh, we need to return that. There's still a big problem with this UI, which you probably have seen already. So what was I saying? First of all, you can see that I'm like making this text field a let constant, and then I'm changing stuff about it. This has to do with the fact that it is a class as opposed to a struct. So most of our models were structs, and when a struct is a let constant, you cannot change anything in it. However, these the stuff in our classes we can change because the class is not a constant. It is the pointer to the class that is constant, which says that it's always pointing to the same instance of something, but we can still change the individual parts of it. Okay, this is now a rounded rectangle. So we can click on it and it makes a keyboard. The keyboard is conveniently right over top of all of our stuff, which is not super helpful right now. So I'm going to move all of this to the top. So let's just, for best practices here, let's say top anchor. And if we make the bottom anchor equal to the top anchor, then our view will be entirely off the screen. So we will make that top anchor 2 and give it a constant of 24. Mothman, Allied Man, hello. Hello, Moatman. Sorry, not Mothman. Your text is very purple against a very black screen and low resolution. I apologize. Also, you know, that urban legend of the Mothman is pretty cool. Okay, so we have moved our stuff to the top by just setting its anchor to the top, and I'm going to click up there, and you can see that the keyboard totally works, but thankfully we're on the simulator, so I can just type with my keyboard as well. So the point here is that we want to set up a state where the user can enter the number of cards that they want to draw. We might have made that too wide. Let's say 30. So I'm going to say when our draw view controller opens, we will set the label to say like draw how many cards, and then anyway, welcome guys. Welcome to the chat. I'm glad you're here. I was a little spooked because no one was talking and it was scary. Scary being by myself programming. It's like I was at work again. Actually, I do have a lot of people to talk to at work. It's very social. That's good. People who work on computers are social people too. That's something I also fight against at work, is like the idea that because I write apps for a living, that I am some sort of emotionless robot who is not gonna get your jokes and stuff. I find that it's weird, but people tend to like lump you into that stereotype really quickly if you are a programmer, which is interesting. Okay, so we're gonna say draw how many cards, and that is the first thing that we are going to do. I want to change this so that it only takes numbers. So we will say text field I think that was just Siri responding to me on my watch, which was terrifying. Okay, so text field dot number pad. She is truly always listening. My daughter has recently, well, not recently, she loves my watch, and she doesn't love it to like play with it as like she loves to play with, or she doesn't like play with it like as a technology device. She grabs onto it like a handle and just like holds onto it. Yeah, I am definitely putting sound out, moment. At least my voice. Let me know if it's too quiet. And I haven't put any music on this time. I was gonna like look for some cool royalty-free stuff that I could put on in the background and still use for VODs, but again, my work week just turned super insane, so I did not in the end have that time. But you can put music on in your home, and I recommend you do. Or I could like play more Big Giant Circles. We could try and do that. What do you guys think? Do you want to hear music? Is that would that be good, or should I just leave it silent? Okay, I've changed the keyboard type here to number pad. This doesn't actually stop non-numerals from being entered into the text field, but it sort of is a start. It's the like cheater, lazy way of doing it. Everyone, like, you know that you can hook keyboards up to iPads, but you can also like hook any sort of Bluetooth keyboard up to an iPhone or Android device. You know this. You're not you use technology. So like theoretically now when I hit this, I get this, right? So I can like only put in numbers, but any time that you hook up a keyboard to it, you can type whatever you want. So all right, let's oh man, how much I would love to put on this new Justin Timberlake song, which is like weird. I don't know. I don't know if I'm sold. I don't know if I'm sold on the new JT. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But it got stuck in my head all last weekend. So I'm going to go back to Big Giant Circles because I know that he is okay with his stuff being used on VODs. If you too know anyone who has advertised their stuff as being okay for VODs, please let me know. Or we could be risky. We could be risky and play this. That would be very appropriate, actually. Let's try that. We could be risky and play this awesome chiptune album and see if it gets us in trouble with the VOD gods. Okay. Gonna bring the music up a little bit. Is that interfering with me, and can you hear it? Tell me what the quality of the sound is, and I will adjust as necessary. JT is doing interesting things these days. Like, I don't know. I mean, haters are going to say it's fake. I'm not going to just quote the song. But it's like, it's such an earworm, but it is not super musical. It almost sounds like it's a remix of a Justin Timberlake song, which was probably the idea. Sound is soundy. My sound is on the quiet side, or the music is on the quiet side? Allied Man. Okay. So right, we were talking about number pad is in. Great. So draw how many cards is on there. I'm not going to bother checking this input right now. Or filtering this input right now. We can just let the user type in whatever they will type, and if they type in something that's not a number, we will ignore it. Music is on the quiet side. Okay, that can be fixed. It was definitely too quiet last time, to the point where it could not be heard. I was watching the VOD as I was editing it, and like, oh, this is unhearable. There is no sound effectively. So let's see how that goes. Okay, so draw how many cards. So we I'm gonna change the name of this button. Say draw view. Draw view dot button. Set. We're playing fast and loose with the music because if the VOD gets muted, then it's gone forever. I can't record locally because the computer is too bad. No. We're gonna set the title of the button to go. For UI control state normal. The normal control state is like the button is just ready to be pushed, and so like for example, if when we tap the button while our touch is being held down, that's I think UI, it's maybe active or selected. I think it's active. Anyway, there's various control states, but normal trickles down to all of them. So if you set normal, then the others sort of follow along for the most part. So that's good. We will go with that for now. So basically, we want the user to tell us how many cards they want to draw, and then we're going to change the UI to allow them to do that. So now seems like a good time to create our first action. I should probably add my... my properties at the bottom here again. It's weird. I was on a project at work where we did that all the time. The properties would go under the functionality. And I don't like it, actually. I must have just done it as a habit last time. I am in no space to be commenting on last week's competence, though, because, like I say, this is very, very tired to be doing this. Okay, so we have our property lifecycle method. We're going to make an action, right? Oh, this should probably be private. Another thing about Swift is access controls. That's kind of important. Access controls they tell us like what has access to the things in our various different classes. So you can see that here we're like accessing like drawView.label.text, drawView.button, etc. If we want to, we can cut other files or other classes off of that stuff by using access controls. So a good example is the stack. Like we don't really necessarily want other classes talking to the stack. Like they shouldn't. This view should be responsible for manipulating its own view. So we don't want to worry about that. The text field we do need to talk to for various reasons. But also most of these, in fact all of these, should be private set. So there are two parts of a property. A property in Objective-C and in Swift, I guess, has three fundamental parts: a setter, a getter, and a stored property, also known as an ivar or instance variable. So back in the day, just like first year programming, you would say like var whatever when you're programming in C, I guess. And you would declare your variable, and it would be a variable that you could manipulate. And at some point, we decided that was unsafe. In the sort of growth and evolution of object-oriented languages. I'm really oversimplifying it, but basically, we got to a point where we have, instead of like declaring instance variables on structs and having them accessible from anywhere, we would create a we would put the instance variables inside a class, and they would be cut off inside that class. Nothing could access to them except for through specific methods that we made that would allow them to be set and gotten. So you would have basically like a variable that would be called text field, and the text field would have would just be accessible only to that class, but then there would be a method called setTextField that would allow you to change the text field, not change its properties and traits, but actually like change from one text field to a different text field. and then you would have another one called just text field, and that would be the getter. And so the getter would retrieve it and would allow you to examine it and get information from it. So this terminology still holds true, and we can create custom setters and getters if we want to have it so like any time that you change the label or anytime that you set the label, that there's a side effect that happens. In this case, we're saying, so this is a property, but the setter is private, so it's effectively read-only. No classes from outside can do that. These we can't change, they are overrides. So we talked about subclasses and superclasses. DrawView is a subclass of UIView, which is just a class that is open to the entire system. Anyone in the system can create a UIView and do stuff with it. DrawView uses all the stuff from UIView, and where we've added our own custom stuff, we don't have to declare anything special, but where we want to change functionality that was already there, so like it already had an initializer that created it, we've overridden that to say, okay, now when you are created, first do whatever you were going to do when you were created, and then do all this setup stuff. So whenever we sort of piggyback on existing functionality like that, we are overriding it, and so we have to call and say we're overriding that method. Okay, so back to here. We are creating an action. Oh, yeah, I was talking about access controls. That's why. All that to say, what I want to do is create a private method and call it start draw, I guess. And it will take as its argument so this is a method that takes a text field as an argument, and it's going to do something with it. Now, why are we passing an entire text field? Well, we want to examine the text field to see what's in it, and the best way to do that is through an action method like this. Now, so what we're able to do, I'm going to use view-to-load here. I'm going to just separate out that super initializer. Before I set up these labels, I'm going to say, so yeah, I'll say button dot add target. So basically, any sort of UI control, which UI button is a subclass of, has the ability to target things, and when something has a target, it sends that target messages whenever certain parameters are met. And so what this method does is it says add a target to this button so that whenever this event happens, in this case touch up inside, so when the person touches it and releases, then do this. And for the action, we need to declare a selector. Selectors are like old Objective-C stuff, and basically it is a method name. And again, oversimplification, but we'll go with that. So we're gonna make a selector out of a method and say start draw. So that's what we want, and we should get a compiler error from this. Yeah, there it is. So it says argument refers to instance method that is not exposed to Objective-C. So this is like a spot where like this whole targeting thing, it triggers selectors, and selectors are an Objective-C business. So because this is a private function, what's happening is this is like going out to the Objective-C runtime, and then Objective-C is like, oh, I need this selector, and then it comes back and looks for it and can't find it because it's private. So we need to say it's private, but it's exposed to Objective-C. So we can make that little declaration there to say Objective-C can see it even though it's private to us. And that should make that warning go away. Okay, so what do we want to do now? We want to say, first we want to get the number of cards that the user has said that they want to draw. So let's draw number equals. Okay, so that seems like an easy way to do it. And then we can say print I love this sort of like Pixies breakdown. Good. Oh, probably would help if I like use proper syntax and stop everything. Just do it again. Now, of course, the astute among you probably already know what the problem is going to be if we try and actually use this to draw cards with, but we will get to that. You can write in the chat though if you already know what the issue is going to be. This might not actually work. Let's see. It's giving me this warning to say expression is implicitly coerced from a string. We don't know that this text view or this text field is going to have a string in it. It might have nil. So that's a situation where we could have a string, but we could not. So yeah, we get an exception because this is not necessarily a string. So I talked before about using optional binding to like pull things out. So we can say if let draw number equals text field dot text, and what that does is it sets up an if statement that says basically if that is a legit string as opposed to an optional that may contain a string, then do whatever is inside these brackets, and if not, skip over it. That's dangerous because you don't always want to skip over your bugs without side effects. You often want to crash or display some sort of warning that you've done something wrong. But we'll do it for now. What did I do wrong? Oh. Yeah, that would be bad. That's oh right, okay, that was silly. So I was treating this as if the text field was sending the message, but it wasn't. Obviously, what's going to get passed in this, so this is another thing. These targets, they pass themselves. So the button is passing itself. So that was a dumb, because yeah, this will give us a button. Tired, very tired. I'm sorry. So we could have actually gotten maybe away with coercing information from this. Incidentally, if we don't want to go through this if-let business, we could also provide a fallback. So we have this double question mark, which is called a nil coalescing operator. And what that does is it says, like, if this is nil, then instead use whatever value this is. Oh, right. So, and then we don't know what textfield.text is because it's actually draw view. Not textfield.text. So So we print 5. We know we can't draw 568 cards, but we can print it. Unfortunately, this is the problem. We can also print strings. And if we try and do stuff with a string as an integer, that's going to be bad news. Now, thankfully, again, we can go back to our we can go back to our optional binding here and say if draw number equals that, we can declare another condition here and say, so if I was draw string, say, add another condition that says let's wait, nope, that's wrong. That's the other direction. Is there an argument in here, or is it just a string? There's one way to find out. Okay, so this will look at the string, and if all the characters are decimal digits, then it will convert it to an integer. Or not. Okay, so there wasn't an argument yet. Everything going so slowly is odd when you're used to like your autocomplete catching everything and just being like, yeah, this is what you want. Especially with like kind of slightly obscure method names. It's not really often that you convert a string to an int, frankly. Okay, so if we write 255 and say go, you can see it prints it now. We say hundo. It doesn't work. We say 100, also doesn't work. Hey, Nice Arrow. Is it Nice Arrow or is it Nick Arrow? I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I'm the worst. So we have we've now elicited a number from this, and we can start our drawing business. So what we're going to do is move over a lot of our functionality from our playground, which may still in fact be open. Hope it's not. No, there it is. There it is. Never closed it. So I guess we should give this a give this its own deck. And we'll just say that the deck is empty. Oh. Alright, so we can only give it... That's interesting. No, it's fine. We'll just give it... Okay. So we'll give it a default value of a full deck. I guess we should also give the option to play with a... I keep on saying play as if it were a game, but it's not really a game. Anyway, so yeah, the option for it to be a full deck or a partial deck, and then we want. So we have 0 draws by default, and so. I'm gonna make how do we name this? Okay, so let's make another helpers. And we'll call it run draw, I guess. Sure. I'll make this private again. Typically our helpers are going to be private. They're used internally to manage internal business of the class. And so if this turns out to be a useful number, we'll say run draw, or we'll say number of draws. Number of draws equals draw number. Great. So great. Nicaro it is. Run draw. Yeah. So and then this is where we want to put our loop. So this is what we had in our playground. And do we need this anymore? No, we do not. It's all on the app now. So again, while the number of draws is greater than 0, we do all this stuff. And so great. Let's instead of saying print the number of draws, that's fine. Print the number of cards left, and then we don't need this do block here. We originally threw there, but we don't anymore, so we can get rid of that. So while the number of draws equals 0, we draw a card from the deck, we decrement the number of draws, and then we make the effect of the card happen. I went back and updated the effects to be much simpler on Sunday, if you were not around. So now the effects are to end the draws, to draw one, or to draw a number of cards, to optionally draw a number of cards, to optionally draw more than one, or yeah, optionally draw however many cards, or back to end the draw. So just these specific cards have effects, and otherwise they don't. And then we just built that into the draw view. Is that where we put it? Did we put it in the draw view controller to actually have those effects? Yes. So if we had a draw effect, it adds that number to the number of draws. If we had an optional draw, right now we're just adding that to the number of cards. And then if it's end, then the number of draws just becomes 0. So, and then when this loop breaks, like when we're finished with it, we want to say that the draw view, draw label, equals, we should move this out of a literal. We should actually move it to a different file. So we'll set not the label itself. Can't set the text field to be a string, it contains a string. So the label says that, and button prompt. isn't gonna work at all. We say, because the buttons have these special methods for setting their titles. So draw view dot button set title for normal. And I guess so it feels like we're repeating a lot of code here, so I'm actually going to make a helper here as well. We call this a private method. And what we'll do is say so configure the UI sets that, but we actually want if the number of draws is 0, then what we want to do is then we want it to be the prompt. Otherwise, what do we want it to be? Oh yeah, draws remaining. Of course, now I've put these all in constants and I've only got them in one place. Sigh. Tired. I forgot how many of these actually have lyrics in them. It's like a Weezer best of by all your favorite chiptune artists. Like, can I just tag an integer on there like that? I don't think it'll let me do that. No. It's okay. So do okay, so what we're doing here you're using kind of fancy notation to say this, for this label, have it equal, and then we say if the number of draws equals 0, then we want the first option, otherwise we want the second option. And then similarly here, we're going to create a variable called button title. We're going to say if the number of draws equals 0, then have it go, otherwise it'll be draw, and then we're going to set the button title to that. Now we're going to go through and all the places that we were going to configure our UI, we will just call our configure UI method. So that was here. That's after every time we draw a card. So we don't need to write this anymore. So after every time we draw a card, and I guess the one other thing we should do is say draw view.text field. All of our UI stuff is hidden. Let's say equals and if it's I always get mixed up with is hidden because I always want it to be like is shown. Like to me it's like if it's true it should be shown, but nope. Wait, and so we don't actually have to do that. We can just say okay, so this is okay. No, we can't actually do that. We would have to say like that. So the text field is hidden if the number of draws is not equal to 0. Probably it's better to just refactor that out at this point. So we're going to say it's a Boolean, so we should start with is. That's sort of like standard customary notation at this point. So extract that. Oh, now I'm messing myself up with it already. So and that makes our logic a little cleaner. Okay, so yeah, let's try this. And maybe you've already seen issues with this, but you know we're learning. We'll figure it out. I'm obviously not going near my normal speed at doing this kind of stuff right now because I'm stopping to explain things and I'm self-conscious because I'm being watched by someone. Oh, that's interesting. I'm allowed to set that even inside. Oh, maybe not. Interesting. That explains why that's been so wide this whole time. Okay, so draw how many cards? 3. Go. Nothing happened. So what that tells me is... so I'm never actually calling my run draw method. I'm not printing it anymore, so it's like changing the number of draws, but it's not actually running the run draw method at all. Whoops. There's a secret tally in the room behind me. You can't see her. You probably can't hear her either. Okay. Alright, now what's happening? So we're hitting this. Hitting that. Hitting that. Hitting that. So we're just not updating our UI. Is basically what's happening. Oh, okay. So yeah, we've made a big mistake here. So here, I'm checking to make sure that the card has an effect, and if we're switching on that effect to make us draw cards or optionally draw cards or end, but then we've got this else in here that says number of draws equals 0. I feel like that's a mistake. That's a holdover from something else. I forgot that logic was there. In any case, so now we're going to configure our UI. That was silly. I also feel like I'm doing really, really simple stuff, but still failing at it, which is awesome. That is exactly what we're here to do. Allie, do you want to say hi? You're welcome to. Like, I can turn on the camera, they can see you if you want.
I have a baby. I'm almost tired.
Yeah. She likes to wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning now.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty exciting.
Mm-hmm. She thinks so.
Yeah, she likes that.
How's the coding going?
I am doing awful at the coding. You do not think that I did this professionally.
Good job. Well, maybe you're good at coding, but your marketing possibly needs work.
Mm-hmm.
Self-marketing.
Possible.
Good luck.
Thanks. Okay, so why did that not work? You would think that would work now. So configure UI is being hit. Draw view.text field is hidden. So if the deck is not empty, deck is empty is evaluating to true. Why would that be? It's probably a typo. It is inside our wall loop, right? I didn't mess up that bad. Now I feel pretty silly. go. Okay. Right now, number of draws is 3. Or did we just happen to draw one of the cards that sets the number of draws to 0? That could happen. Configure UI. Deck is empty equals true. And we stop. Number of draws is 3. Number of draws is 2 when we get there. Deck is empty equals false. I think we've just been happening to hit the cards that make us stop drawing. But this is configuring as if
as to doing horribly. Did you mention the fact that you've been awake since 3 in the morning?
And been coding for most of that time?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but this is like really simple logic and somehow I'm failing at it, so I don't understand. Ugh. I don't understand what's going wrong. Like, number of draws is 1. Is deck empty is false. So that should be draws remaining, number of draws. And yet it's not. This is like... This is literally like messing up on the ABCs. So I don't know why this is happening, but maybe it's a signal that I just need to stop. The whole loop is running, but the UI isn't updating. Oh. Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah. I'm dumb. I'm dumb. This isn't a loop necessarily. Or I'm not calling configure inside my loop. We only want to draw one card. So, yeah, that's silly. So, the issue is that I was just running through my entire loop all at once. Because of course I was. Because when we were demonstrating in our playground, we wanted to run the entire sequence. We wanted to see everything that would happen. But here we just want to draw one card. So we want to draw one card, decrement the number of draws, and then go. And my wife is right. I have been up since 3 in the morning, which is a long time ago. It's a long time ago. Okay, let's try this again with only drawing one card and see what happens. Oh no. Oh, it's so bad. Da-da-da. 3. Draws remaining 2. Okay, so we now have something that is happening, but it's weird. So what's happening is we're going to the start draw method every time, and every time that we call that, it is getting the number from the text field, and so it's resetting the number of draws to 3, and that is not what we want. We want to go. We want to not reset it if we have already started a session. So say so is there any way that we can figure out if we're drawing cards? And I don't think so right now. It's like if we have cards and there are cards left to draw. Okay, yeah, that works. So let's say so we'll create an array of cards called cards drawn. We'll just set it to an empty array right now. And then here, so cards drawn, append, not contents of, we just want to append the card that we drew. So number of draws -1. Are you sure that's not valid? I'm pretty sure it's valid. There we go. So we will add that to our cards drawn. Configure the UI. And then I'm going to combine these into multiple conditions on the same thing to get rid of a little bit of our pyramid of death that's sort of happening here. Bring that back to the left a little. So I guess after this is done, we want to say like if the deck is empty. No, not if the deck is empty. If number of draws equals 0. Wait, what am I doing? We don't... We will keep this like adding the cards draw and stuff, but we don't need to get that complicated with it yet. So if number of draws is greater than 0, otherwise, so I guess this is if number of draws equals 0, we're going to do that. Otherwise, we just run a draw. Right. Okay, so if the number of draws equals 0, then we grab the number from the field and add it to the draw number and run the draw. Again, we can coalesce these into one. Keep them from getting too far left. So if the number of draws is 0, then we have two ifs. Then we try and get the number from the field and set the number of draws to that and then run the draw. Otherwise, we just run the draw, which means that we're running the draw in both possibilities, so we can actually just extract this and do it after. So, yeah. Now, let's see what happens. Jeremy, the programmer who failed preschool, cannot do the simplest ABCs. Okay. So, draw 3 cards. Go. 2 draws remaining. 1 draw remaining. And then it sets us back to here. Fantastic. I guess one other thing that we should do is, after we've got all this, we should say... draw view dot text field dot text and just blank that out. So that, you know, that when this comes back, it's not lame. And we can also just say we'll just force an end editing, and that should make the keyboard go away. And then it's blank when it comes back. Fantastic. Okay, let's fix. So this is giving us, you can see all this output here, and it's basically telling me, hey, you idiot, you made a mistake in drawing your view, and you created a layout that is not legal. You have constraints that contradict each other or are ambiguous. In this case, they contradict each other. So again, if we look at our little model of how everything is put together, we have this stack view, which is the big box. It stretches out to the 2 edges, and it contains these things. It is set to have these things stretch out to their maximum width within it. And then we have this text view, which we have set to a width of 30, but it can't actually have a width of 30 because it is inside this stack. Boo-hoo. So I'm just gonna create this can just be totally private because no one will ever need to interact with it. Private lazy var text field container UI text field. No, wait, no, we just want to view. This is just an empty box, just completely transparent, and we're going to put that into stack. And then we're going to say text field container. You know what? This is not a good way of doing this. The good way of doing this is I was going to put it inside a container and then like use constraints on all sides to do stuff with it. I think that actually the better way of doing this is just to take my stack and say stack dot alignment center and see what that does. So the stack lays things out along whatever its axis is. So in this case, it has a vertical axis, and then we can give it an alignment, which I don't know what it defaults to actually, whether it's full or fill or what. Aha, there we go. So that makes things a lot nicer. So draw 3 cards, go, draws remaining 2, draws remaining 1. Draw. Okay. I guess so. Now we need to figure out. Let's commit some of this. So we're doing a lot here, kind of, but we're mostly just adding. This is big slops. Really, this should be split up into multiple commits, but and then this is like the core loop of our app, ultimately. So that's pretty good. It looks like garbage right now, but we'll fix that later. So great. We got that. We can't even see what cards we're drawing, which is not great, but we'll fix that in a second. Maybe, well, later. We'll figure it out. Okay, so now let's... Before I deal with that, I want to deal with the optional draw. Remember I said I would deal with this later. So right now, if we draw one of those cards, it has an effect immediately. It's interesting that we haven't seen a lot of effects yet, if any. I wonder if that's working. Anyway, we'll figure that out in a sec. What I want to do is, because we're going to test it. Not actually put that in there. We'll say here we want some sort of feedback, so I'm just going to do the really sloppy programmer thing and show an alert and just ask what the user wants to do. UI alert controller. This is not Objective-C. Okay, so we are going to do that. Title. So maybe we should give the cards the name of the card. Okay, so we're creating what we call an alert controller, which you have seen if you use any phone before. It's the thing that pops up in the middle and has buttons on it that is like, hey, there's a thing that's happened. Do you want to with the thing? And you say something in response to it. Probably would help if I actually said that it was a thing that I wanted to store in memory. Okay, so then we say alert controller. Add action, and then we will just create an action here. Alert action. I guess we'll say yes. So the action style is default, and the handler is what we want to do in response to that. We can actually move the handler out of there to make it a little bit more clear what's happening. So we create our alert controller, we add an action to it that says, that's called yes, so this is one of the buttons the user can press, and if they press it, then the result is that they their number of draws is incremented by that number. And I think we just need to pass a property into this. Okay, now this is also interesting. You can see it says reference property number of draws in closure requires explicit self. In Swift, you can see that we don't use self dot whatever a lot. So in most other programming languages, if you've got an object or a struct, you use self to say the thing that relates to this instance of this class. So we just refer to draw view here instead of self.draw view. In a closure, which is what this is a piece of code that is being stored in memory and then used at a later time. And so if we want to reference this particular instance that we are in, we need to basically pass a reference to it into the closure so that can be stored in memory. That can be very dangerous sometimes because it can lead to memory leaks, especially if you have a closure that you are passing around between classes or between objects. That can be very bad. But for right now, it's pretty safe just to put that self there and not worry too much about it. And we're going to create another action that is going to be no. Style is cancel. And we're just gonna not provide a behavior for it because it doesn't do anything. It just dismisses the alert controller. But we do need to close this off. And then finally, so we created an alert controller. We've added two actions to it. We need to say self dot present that. Yeah, that looks right. So present alert controller animated true. We want to animate, and completion. We are not going to provide completion. We don't care. Completion is just like, do you want some to provide some code to run after this has been presented, not in response to one of the user's actions, but just in response to it being presented. And no, we don't. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is say, well, I guess we could just draw a bunch of cards. What I was going to do is just like, I can straight up just change this to a variable and like change it in here so that it's whatever we want. But let's just draw a bunch of cards and see if we get one that shows up. That sounds more fun. See if it actually works. If we don't see any, then it's very probable that something is wrong. Oh, this is a string. That's not good. So instead of being the name property of the card, I had a string that said card.name. At work, that's how we index stuff in string files. So we will say like cell.alert or whatever. Card has no member name. What did we call it? Did we call it title? We did. Card.title. Should probably put more music on so you don't have to deal with me singing weird doot doot music. I should probably also center that. That looks pretty garbage. Draws remaining 9. Okay, I think we just hit the one of the ones that removes all the cards. Okay, I want to know if that happens. So I'm just going to say so if we hit this draw, then we'll get an alert controller that says draws increased by number. What did I mess up here? Yeah, it's off in brackets. Okay, let's space this out a bit. So we already know that the card has an effect here. I wonder if I can change this after the alert controller has been created. Alert controller. Yeah. Okay, I can. So why don't we just say if there is an effect, create an alert controller. Title will be the card's title. The message will be empty. Freaking me out, compiler. And if it's a draw, then we will say we can actually set the message to no. So if it's a draw, we will say say that the draws are increased by the number. Maybe we should it's a little clearer. Okay, so if it's a draw effect, then we say draws increased by the number, and we'll add that. Oh, really? That's strict. I don't like that at all. I like wrapping my cases in brackets. Okay, that's better. So, yeah, optional draw. We've already created this, but we want to set the message. Set them a message. Message. And let them have the option. And then if it's and then we'll add the OK button to there again, like so. That's a little more readable. Okay, so we create an alert controller beforehand. So if it has an effect, we create an alert controller, and then depending on the effect, we change the message of the alert controller to say what it does. If it's a draw, the user doesn't have a choice, so they say all they can say is okay. If it is a choice, if it's an optional draw, then we ask them, and they can say yes or no. And if the case is end, then the number of draws is 0, and the message is draw no more cards. And again, the user can't respond to that. They just get an okay. aside from that, like, one really embarrassing thing, this is going okay. Going okay. So 9 draws remaining. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Don John. We draw no more cards. Alright. Chester, draw an extra 2 cards. So, interesting. So, that's... Like, it did the right thing, but it configured the UI after. So what's happening here is, like, we are going through this whole method, and then it's like when the alert goes off, like when the user clicks yes, then the number of cards has changed. But we've long since gone through this entire thing. There's nothing stopping this. Like, just because an alert appeared doesn't mean that this method stops execution. So when the user taps yes, that's great, but the UI was already configured because it's already gone past. So we will instead just drop a configure UI method after method call after these as well. Maybe I can just, because it's anytime that no, it has to be after they I guess in this case, in any case aside from this one, so just this one needs the UI configured. Sorry, I just need to mute for a sec. Okay, as with changing the number of draws, we need to explicitly say self here because we are inside a closure, and this shouldn't be too much of a problem. So there are memory issues here. Like, if we're creating a closure and, like, storing it in memory, like within this object, that's an issue, because a strong reference to this means that they could create something called a retain cycle, which is a memory leak. Basically, it means that these things will never be allocated or deallocated from memory. So normally, when you would think, remember, we're dealing with, like, references. So whenever you have a situation where I'm very tired. Hold on. Trying to think of, like, what's a good drawing app that I could pull up. This is a bad idea while streaming and also having Xcode running. It's like old Photoshop though, so I'm sure it'll be fine. Well, new. Okay, so when we're dealing with memory, in these Apple-y languages, we use something called automatic reference counting to figure out what, like how many, whether or not we should persist our objects in memory. So if we just create stuff and shove it into memory over and over and over again, our memory is going to eventually fill up and our computer's going to crash. So we need to delete stuff from memory. And it used to be that what you would do is you would say when things should be deleted from memory. So I would be programming and I'd be like, okay, I created whatever thing and put it in memory for a bit, and then I'm done with it. Okay, let's deallocate that. Now I create another thing and put it in memory and then deallocate it after a bit. When I'm done with it, it would be my job to clean up after myself. That is not great because it relies on programmers being thoughtful and remembering and all these things, and it can be tough to keep that up. So some smart people have created something called garbage collection, which is in a lot of computer languages or programming languages. And garbage collection is basically processes that run constantly that are like going through and finding memory that's not being used for anything and getting rid of it. They deallocate it and free it up. Great, awesome. Good for you, garbage collection. The problem is that garbage collection is a bunch of processes that are constantly running in the background and are running at the same time as other as the stuff that you're actually trying to do, and so they can theoretically cause some slowness and badness and not be great. So garbage collection, the idea with iOS, because it was running on a phone especially, was to try and avoid garbage collection because the extra overhead of having to run stuff all the time was very bad. So instead they have something called automatic reference counting. Automatic reference counting now means that we don't have to declare stuff as being deinitialized, but we have to be careful with our stuff sometimes. So here is the principle of how it works. I have one object, object 1, and then over here I have object 2. Object 1, I'm going to create my instance of object 2 and I'm going to store it in a variable. So I store it in a variable, and when I'm done with it, I'm going to say var whatever equals nil. So what's actually happening here is not that, like, I am not storing the object. I am creating another object, and I am storing what we call a pointer to it. So it's a pointer that says where it is in memory. So that's great, and that's fine and dandy. I have my reference, and I say that's nil, and then this will go away. When we're using arc, it goes away automatically. Now, the reason it goes away is because the number of pointers pointing at it was reduced to 0. So each object under arc keeps track of how many pointers are pointing at it. So if I point this at it, then its reference count goes to 1. And if I have another object and that object points to it, its reference count goes to 2. And then, if I delete this object, come on, I want a really nice big eraser. What? No, gosh, no. That was bad. I need to learn how to use Photoshop. Why is my eraser's opacity so low? Okay. Okay, so this gets deleted. Now, because it's no longer there, it's not pointing to this, so this reference count goes down to 1, and then if this stops pointing at it or is deleted itself, it goes down to 0, and then the system automatically, or it going down to 0 will send a notification to the system will come and delete it. And that's how we got our memory freed up. The problem that we can encounter is the situation where we have two objects that are pointing at each other. Like this. So if we have two objects that point at each other, we enter a situation where if this object, if we delete our reference to this object, it doesn't go away. It just exists forever, pointing to this. And we might not even have like another reference like basically the two objects will, if you set up a situation like this, can end up pointing to each other forever. Neither each of them prevents the other one from being deinitialized because they both prevent the reference count of the other from reducing to 0, and that's not good. So we don't want to have that. The problem with our closures, like we mentioned over here, is that with these self declarations, which are storing a reference to self, is that they're being saved inside in memory, in the memory of this view controller. So in this case, it's only saved in this alert controller. So the alert controller is saved to memory very briefly, and this is put into memory there, and then we display it, and then the entire alert controller goes away, and this does break down, so that's fine. But we can create situations where we store these for a long time and they're persisted longer than we want them to be, or perhaps indefinitely if we enter a really sticky, yucky situation. So we want to avoid that, but we don't have to worry about it here because this is such a fleeting sort of example. So yes, not going to worry about it. Anyway, this does seem to be working, and that's great. I'm going to try it one more time and then move on to something more interesting. Gesture, draw 2 extra cards, yes. Aha, and then that immediately increased it. Don John, draw no more cards. And then we go back to the start. Great, perfect. That's what we want. I guess the next thing that we should do is, first of all, make our text field visible. So I'm going to do this as a fix-up commit. This one. So we're going to tweak that. So add text field to draw view. Fix up. Commits and okay, so I'm gonna fix this up. Just grab this, put it here, squash it in. Boom. Okay, so back to what we were doing. Committed the card effect. Good. So let's create a transition that shows us the card in another view. This is going to be super ugly like everything else we've been doing, but we'll get there. So cancel, belay that order. Let's create a group. Call it card view. And new file. This is our card view controller. It is not surprisingly going to show a card. And so it will need a This is going to be relatively simple as far as these things go. So we'll say that it has one constant, which is a card in it. This is the default initializer for view controller, is to ask for a nib name and a bundle. When we're doing things programmatically like this, that's basically always going to be nil. Also, we are required to put this initializer in, but we do not implement it. So we'll just leave that as is. So on our initializer, we'll say self.card equals card. So in initializer, where we are setting things that are named the way that the thing is named, we use this self notation. So these are different variables. This is this one, and this self.card is this one. This is a let, so it can never be changed once it's set, but it can be set in the initializer. And you can also see it's not optional, so that means that we have to set it in the initializer. So we will do that. And do we need much else? Well, we need the view. New file, and we will say, did I call that file? Yeah, I totally did. That was silly. Okay, so we need our card view. And so I'll do this first. Properties. Life cycle. So yeah, we'll implement load view here like we did in the other view controller. We'll set up card view. Same bound as usual. View equals card view. And then for this, we can say so we'll say label. Private set lazy var label. Let's UI label. Translates how to precisely masks and constraints equals false. So we're going to use layout constraints to set this up. So activate layout constraints, and we will say label dot Something's wrong. I called it a label as opposed to a UI label. Dot constraint equal to layout margins guide leading. Center Y anchor dot constraints equal to center. Okay, so that should put it about where we want. It'll be centered vertically and then horizontally between the two sides. Let's say label dot text alignment equals center. Center. And we have to do the required initializer. That is there. Dot 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 dot. Okay. Now what? So we say self.card equals card, and then on view did load. We'll say super view did load, and then so when we initialize this, we save the name, card.title. should just change that. We save the card, and then when the view loads, we set its label's text to the card's title. And of course, we need to actually show this view. So I guess I'm going to put that here for now. So I'll say let card view controller equal, we'll create an instance of card view controller and pass it our card. Present card view controller. That's a problem. So if we do this, but we have this alert controller up, then that's going to happen at the same time. So our individual card view controller here, not the class itself. So I guess what we'll do is say this is like the effect stuff, so we'll only do this if there's no effect. Maybe we should make a helper method for this. So, see, this doesn't necessarily even need to be an else. If it's, so we'll just let the switch case continue to fall through there. What we will do in this case is, but then we never present it. Okay, so I guess in this case we present the view controller. Rather, the alert controller. And return. So just end the method call entirely. And then instead of configuring the UI in here, we'll just resolve draw there. So I don't like this method name. That's better. Oh, it's resolve card. Yeah, that's sloppy method name. This is probably going to be actually slower given the speed of my computer than just going through and changing the text. Yeah, totally is. So we'll just call it resolve. And we need to say self here. So we just added that. So now instead of just configuring the UI, we also show the view controller if it needs to be shown. And so here, return will immediately end this run draw method call. So we will never actually resolve, but any other case will fall through and hit that. So hopefully this will work. Create a card view controller, present it, and hopefully I didn't mess up on anything else simple, but I don't know. Been up for a long time, so anything could happen. Great. You no doubt saw the word rogue like shoot up from the bottom, and then everything went black. Let's see what happens if we set a background color on the view. Let's draw 3 cards. Okay, so we drew star. Fine and dandy, but there's a problem. There's no way to get back. We're stuck here forever. We wished upon a star, and we went too far. So there's a bunch of ways that we could do this. We can make a button to do it. I think that what I'm going to do is, for now, I don't know if I'm going to do this as a permanent solution, but you know, this is all a bunch of YOLO anyway. So let's say, instead of presenting the controller by itself, we will say let's we'll create a navigation controller, and we'll want a root view controller. That was not O at all. So we will do that, and then instead of pushing the card view controller, we will push the navigation controller. Now, a navigation controller you've probably seen many times. It is a thing that has a bar at the top, and when you click on things in it, it pushes cards sideways over top of itself, and then they have back buttons in the upper corner, and you can hit the back button and it goes back the other direction. You've seen this a million times. I am going to create a navigation controller and stick this inside of it because it creates an easy way for me to dismiss it. So now we have this bar at the top, which is what we want. And back to our draw view controller. We're not to our draw view, card view controller. We're going to say navigation item dot left bar button item equals UI bar button item. So this is bar button item is anything that appears inside of a menu bar, not a menu bar. What's the word I'm looking for? Not a navigation bar, which is what this is, but any sort of bar. The bar button items appear inside. Again, you've seen these many times. Dots. Cancel. Target. Self. Selector. You've seen this before. Dismiss, and we don't have a method called dismiss. Lifecycle. No, we've already created lifecycle. We want actions. And we want func dismiss. We can pass the bar button item if we want to. We can also just pass something called sender and just pass a UI control into it or whatever we want. But this should be fine without. We will say it is private, but we want Objective-C to be able to see it so that we can point stuff at it. And we'll say self.dismiss animated. Oh, okay, so we've named this the same name as a built-in method for this, so that's not going to work. We'll have to call it something else. Dismiss card. So 3 cards. We drew the Don John. That's interesting. It didn't actually show the... Okay. So that seems to be working. Aside from the fact that if we hit 0 cards, we don't see our card. It is only if we hit the John John that we see 0 cards. Let's take a look at what's going on there. That's actually kind of weird. I feel like we should have seen it. So maybe... okay. This present is probably just getting conflicted. Because we're presenting the action sheet at the same time that we otherwise... So this worked because we specifically planned around it. But these are not. So I'll actually have to... You know what? I'm not even gonna bother with that actually, because the other thing is that I was about to do anyway before we found that bug, was leave that there. The other thing that I was gonna do before discovering that bug was move the effect resolution to the card view controller. So let's actually just do that now. So that's a lot cleaner. And then in our card view controller, we'll create a helper method. Mark helper. And call this paste that there. And then this is going to cause errors, but we have another lifestyle method called view-did-appear. And in there we will say view-did-appear, animated is animated. And then we will resolve the card effect, if any. Now, this is going to not compile, as it shouldn't. And the reason it's not going to compile is that we have these things in here that say self.number of cards, and that doesn't work. So first of all, we don't need to resolve this card. We don't need to resolve this in here anymore. That is just happening for every card, and we're pushing here. But there's no any reference to number of draws needs to be sorted out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass a function into here. I guess first I'll declare a type alias called yeah, this works. I think. I don't want to pass in here. We could pass a reference to ourself in here, but that feels sketchy. I guess maybe we should just pass back the card effect. So type alias. Resolver handler. So this is a function that takes a card effect, returns nil. So type alias just gives a name to this kind of function. So we're going to call this an effect handler, and then we will say, so with a capital E, and then we will say var effect handler optional effect handler, and we will pass this in to this view controller after we create it. So so this is still the same, but the stuff that has to do with the number of draws, that's where we're going to do stuff. So So we'll pass the effect back like that. Not super happy about this, but I feel like this is basically what we want in the end. We're running very low on time here, and I did promise Tally that I would be done on time so that we could go to bed on time. Okay. So back to our card view controller. So we pen the card. We resolve the card. We present this. Before we present it, we're going to say card view controller dot effect handler, and then we're going to say where did my switch theming go? So we're also going to look at the effect here. Not here, here. here. Aha. And this is where we're going to say now we're not actually going to catch the optional draw here. I'm just going to do draw end to end. Probably would help if I actually enclosed that in the switch statement. And we are over time. All right. Oh. We are probably going to have to call it pretty much now. Draw a number of cards. Give me like 2 seconds. So, this is what we're doing. This is a way for us to get around the memory problems that we talked about by handling self-enclosures. Case. Okay. That will almost do it. In the optional draw, instead of handing back the effect here, I'm going to hand back draw number. So if they've said yes, then we're just going to change the optional draw to a full draw. And let's see if this works. Oh, already see errors. Missing a bracket somewhere? Yeah, okay. Bingo bango. Okay, try that. Oh, and not dot default, case default. So default is just if it hits something that it doesn't recognize, which in this case would be optional draw, but oh, it's not case default, it's just default. So if it doesn't find a case that it recognizes. Okay, if this works, we're done. If it doesn't work, we're also done. Okay, but we will try and see if it works, and then I will sign out. Because I gotta go, because now my in-laws have arrived after I've been upstairs streaming and been up for 18 hours or something. So, yes. Draw how many cards? 10, go. Idiot. So this hits and it says draw 1 extra card, yes or no? Yes. Cancel. Draw. Talons, cancel. Okay, there's definitely a bug here in that the UI is not being updated anymore after this. So we need to configure the UI. Self.configure UI. That should solve it. Okay, great. That is basically all the time that we have. I am overtime, so I need to get back to, oh my gosh, OBS and Xcode at the same time. They just can't do it. They just can't do it. Okay, there, we're back to my face. I got to get going. Thank you for watching today. We made a lot of good progress. Things are looking pretty good. All things considered, I'm pretty happy. with how we're going. We now have a completely blank screen, so functioning as intended. I assume it's just OBS and the camera and everything else doing bad stuff together, but it's coming along. We have an app that looks pretty awful, and it will only get better from here. So yeah, I just want to get one of the idiot. There we go. Yes. So I think that works. 5, 4, 3. Yes. To go back to 5. Yes, it does. Okay, good. We're good. Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. And I will talk to you next week. If not, maybe sooner. Who knows? Who knows? It could happen. But next week for sure. See you soon. Thanks so much.